Hey everyone, welcome to week 4 now of the Lusive Arts music production course. So this week we're going to be taking a look at mainly sampling and audio tracks in general. We'll also be taking a look at using the sampler and the simpler and how we can chop up audio files to make them more unique so that we can use them in our tracks. And I'll also be going over warp modes and what they are and just explaining those a bit more in depth. So to get started here, I am going to move into the arrangement view, which you've been working on for the last week. Now I'm just going to delete these two MIDI tracks here. Actually, I'll just delete this audio track as well. So for the past week, you've been putting your track together in this view, in the arrangement view, from the parts that you put together in the session view, from the parts of your track, all those instruments, the drums and everything. Now we're going to look at audio tracks and how we can spice up your track a little bit more using audio files. So to start this lesson off, I'm just going to cover warping and what that is. Okay, so I've just dragged in this a cappella here that I found on my hard drive. It's from Deadmau5. It's Raise Your Weapon. I'm sure quite a few of you will be familiar with this track.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
Now if I double click this track here, so not so much the track, the audio track itself, but the actual clip, the audio file, you'll see now I get this waveform at the bottom here, and I'll get a bunch of options on the left hand side, which we've briefly looked into with the length of the bars and whatnot for the MIDI tracks. So the first thing you'll see up here is that it has been warped because the warp is on here. If I turn this off, it's now playing at its original BPM.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so
I'm just going to turn warp back on for now. Now down here we've got the BPM. So this is different to the BPM that's up here. So this is the BPM for your whole track, whereas this is the BPM for the actual audio file that you've brought in. Now I'm going to cover this in more detail in just a minute here, but for now I'm just going to move along. So here you'll see divided by 2 and times 2. So if I divide by 2, it's going to make it quicker. If I times 2, it's going to make it slower. So if I play this,
ripping my heart so easy, so easy. Not your soul now.
you hear it's much quicker. Same thing if I go times 2.
Ripping my heart was so easy.
And you can hear how much slower it is there. You can also see when I change this that the BPM changes. So when we're going slower, it's taking into account that this is actually a 240 BPM audio file, which it isn't, which is why it's playing so slow. But I'm just going to set that back to 120 for now. So moving down here, we have our warp mode. So at the moment it's set to beats, and you can hear when I play this, let's say I make it slower. You can hear how choppy it is, and it doesn't really sound very nice. The way we can fix that is by actually changing the warp mode. So you can see at the moment it's set to beats. So all these different warp modes here are used or have their strengths in different scenarios. So beats you would want to use for things like drum loops, percussion, things that are rhythmic, because it'll maintain those transients a little bit better on the beat. Tones you want to use for, it's quite self-explanatory, but anything tonal. So let's say like a synth, a sustained synth, or even a vocal sometimes. Basically things that have more of a melody. Texture would be most useful for, I guess, more abstract sounds. You can think of this as like effects, even let's say drones or Foley, noise, that kind of stuff. Just sounds that wouldn't really fit into either of these two. Now repitch works in the same way that vinyl does. So if you make it slower, it's going to be pitched down. So if you slow down vinyl, it's going to pitch down and get slower. And if you speed it up, it's going to get high pitched and it's going to get faster. Now complex is pretty much a combination of everything. beats and tones mainly, where it takes into consideration both the rhythmic elements and the tonal elements of an audio file, and it kind of blends the two to create the best possible warp mode. So this is quite handy for audio files that would have both drums and melody. Let's say you had an entire song that you wanted to change the speed of or the tempo of. You could do that and still maintain a lot of the drums and a lot of the tonal elements as well, the melodic elements. Next one we have is Complex Pro. The Complex Pro is exactly like Complex, except it gives you options. So you can change the formants and the envelope as well. Now I'm just going to explain formants really quickly in the best way that I've learned and that I possibly can. You can think of formants as the size of the voice box. So let's say you have two different vocalists. So you have a giant and someone who's a gnome. Even though they might be singing, sorry, it's a terrible example, but it's the best I can think of right now. Even though they might be singing the same notes in the same octave, because the size of the voice and the source of that voice box is completely different. So obviously the giant is going to be much deeper, and the gnome or whatever with a smaller voice box is going to have a much higher voice. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I hope it does. If you want to look more into formants, feel free to do some of your own research, but I think that's the best way I can explain it for now. The best way to learn what it does is essentially just mess around with this while you're playing around with samples. Same with the envelope here, is basically how much graininess or quality you want to maintain, and you can just play around with that to get something that you like. So I'll move over to the left here now. You can see we have transpose. I'm going to set this back to 120. And I'm just going to leave it on, we'll leave it on complex for now. I'm going to mess around with the transpose here. This is basically semitones down the bottom here, this ST. So obviously, if I move it up one, it's going to be one semitone up. So I've just transposed the whole audio file a semitone up. If I go up 12 semitones, that's one octave, because there are 8 whole notes. So now I'm an entire octave up. If I want to go an octave down, I would go to negative 12.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
So you can hear it's the same key now, just an octave down. Over here we have the volume slider, so you can see as I change this, the volume changes and it gets louder and quieter. And then down here we have detune. So this is basically extra fine transposing, so it works in cents.
My heart was so easy, so easy.
Could be handy if your audio file is slightly out of tune and you want to fix it, or if you want to make it slightly out of tune to give you a different effect. Now up here we have rev, which is reverse. So if I hit this, it does its thing, and now it's reversed the entire audio file. So I'm going to play it from here. Okay, so pretty self-explanatory. Moving over here, you can actually edit parts of this. So let's say some of the words weren't hitting at the right point. You can make your own clip markers. So you can see these little faint grey lines here.
Ripping my heart was so easy.
Let's say it was out of time. You could double click on one of these grey markers and just move that word to where you want.
Ripping my heart was so, ripping my heart was so easy.
You can make things quicker.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
So you can have complete control over your audio file and the way that it's warped. This is especially handy if you're recording drums or guitar or any instruments or even vocals and you miss the beat slightly. You can come in here and just fix that. You can think of this as like quantizing. So I'm just going to bring up another sample now and we'll go into those warp modes a little bit more. So now I have this little drum loop here along with this vocal. I'm just going to turn this track off and have just the drum beat on for now. Double click this to get our options. So you can see I'll just drag this in and my project file is set to 120 BPM. but this sample was actually made in 125 BPM. So you can see Ableton was smart enough to figure that out, and it set the BPM of the original file to what it actually was. Sometimes Ableton doesn't do a very good job at figuring out what BPM the original file was, and it will set this to something weird. So let's say it thought it was 115. So you can hear, I'll just turn this off, put the click back on, the classic. Okay, so that's our timing. Let's say Ableton brought it in and the timing was off. So it thought that our sample was at 115. You'll hear now. You hear it's all completely out of whack. The drum is not in time with that track at all. That's because this segment BPM was wrong. So usually for drums and stuff, Ableton will get this right. So I'm going to set this back to 125 and play it. So you can hear that it's perfectly in time now, and we can see that by looking at where the transients are hitting on our grid. So you can see on each quarter note that kick's hitting, whereas if I mess with this, so I put it at 115 again, you can see by this fifth kick here, we're starting to shift out of whack, and all of these are slowly moving off the grid. Set this to 125. Now let's say you didn't know the BPM of your original track. It wasn't in the sample file. You have no recollection of what BPM it was. So you can't just punch in a number here like I did. So let's say Ableton brought in and it was wrong. What you can do is actually go in yourself, and you can see I've got these two yellow markers here. So just get rid of this last one. And I'm just going to zoom in a bit here. So the first one's hitting on the first beat, that's fine. Now, this kick here, I can see, probably wants to hit about there. So now that it's in time with our track. And we can see over here, when I did that, it actually changed the BPM to 124.98. So it was very close. So what I have to do now is navigate right to the end of this, this clip. Just make sure that I'm on the beat. And you can see now it's snapped to 125. So if you have no idea what the BPM of your original sample was, and you can't just punch in the number, you just rewarp this. You can't just do this and punch in a number because you don't know what it was. You can do it the way I just showed you. So just get rid of all the warp markers and then shift this around manually and do the warping yourself. Now this was quite easy because it was a drum loop and there were really distinct transients. So you can see the kicks hitting on every quarter note. So it was easy to drag that along and figure out where that was. But with a vocal, it's going to be a little bit trickier. So you're actually going to have to listen to where the words are hitting and which word needs to hit on the beat. So I'll just show you with this vocal. Bring this dead mouse vocal back.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
So you can hear that it's definitely not in time with our track. So let's see if we can warp this vocal to match our 120 BPM track. Now I have no idea what the original BPM of this vocal was. It's definitely not 120 because
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
it's not in time with our track. So let's see if we can fix this up now. Now you can hear that it's slightly delayed. The ripping should be on that first beat. So I'm just going to zoom in here at the start. I'm going to drag this first yellow marker back so that the ripping actually starts on the beat.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
Now to me,
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
that easy wants to be on the beat. So I'm going to just drag this over.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy. Launch your assault now. Take it easy.
So that launch was a little bit late, so that wants to be on there.
Launch your assault now. Take it easy. Raise your weapon. Raise your weapon. One word.
So that one word wants to be on the beat. Basically, I'm going down the line and just seeing where it needs to be on the beat. And obviously that's going to shift what I did before, but I'm trying to find the overall correct BPM. If I just went to the end, I wouldn't know where I actually am and how out of whack it is. So I sort of slowly need to work my way up and fix the words to eventually arrive to the correct BPM. What you don't want to do is double click and create markers, because that's going to actually change the audio track in segments, and you don't want to do that, because when it was recorded, it was actually recorded in time, and this a cappella wouldn't be released if it was completely out of whack. So we know that the a cappella is correct, the time is correct, we just need to figure out what the BPM was. If you recorded your own vocals or your own drums and you were out of time in different segments, you can double click to insert warp markers and change it that way. But for something like this, where we know that overall as a whole it's in time, we just need to figure out what the BPM is. We don't actually need to warp different sections of it. So I'm going to keep moving along here.
One word, and it's over. Ripping through like a missile. Ripping through my heart. This love. Weapon. Raise your weapon. And it's over. So easy.
Okay. I'm going to play this now.
Ripping my heart was so easy. So easy. Launch your assault now. Take it easy. Raise your weapon.
So you can hear overall as a whole, it's a lot more in time now. So the actual BPM was closer to, it's probably going to be 128. If I change this, set that to 128. I think that's what the original BPM was. So it was set to 120 before and it sounded wrong, but we figured out now by going through and just doing small little adjustments that it was actually 128. So we can hear now that the beginning is all in time. And let's just go to the end here.
Raise your weapon. Raise your weapon.
So you can hear that those razor weapons are hitting on the beat as well. So the whole thing should be in time now. So let's look at the difference. So this is at 128. This was at how it brought it in at 120, what Ableton thought it was. So you can see we couldn't just go to the end here and drag this to there, because we don't know what's happening with the middle of the track. And if I do that, say back to 120, and I put it to 128, you can see how that's shifted. This end bit has shifted from here to here. So we wouldn't have known that unless we slowly went through the track and did our little adjustments, that we would arrive to having this word hit on this beat here. So I encourage you to grab some audio files, grab some vocals that you don't know the BPM of, drag them in, some acapellas, drag those into Ableton, and just set the BPM up here to something random that you know that the original track's not in, and see if you can warp the audio file so that it actually stays in time with your track, and use the metronome here to keep yourself in time so you can check where those transients are hitting. In case you aren't familiar with the terms that I'm using when I say transients, what a transient is, it's essentially the very beginning and the creation of a waveform or a sound. You can see when we look at this drum track here, that's our kick, that's our little hi-hat, and then a little percussion here. But you can see visually that the sound starts here and then fades off. That's what I mean when I say transients. So I just wanted to cover that real quick. Now moving back to our vocal track here. When I was shifting this around, we had it set to complex. I'm going to shift this to beats, and I'm going to set this and slow this right down to something like 200. Just drag this out, because when it slowed it down, it maintained the original clip length, but we actually want the rest of our vocal here. So I just need to drag this out. Now when I play this,
Ripping my heart, but so easy, so easy.
you can hear how many artifacts are actually in there and how it's all chopped up. It's not very nice. That's because we're using beats, and beats is what you want to use for something like this, for something like drums. So if I change this to tones,
Ripping my heart, but so easy.
here it maintains a little more of our original quality, but it's still quite grainy. Now we can use this little grain size in our tones option to try and fix that a little bit.
My heart was so easy, so easy. Ripping my heart was so easy.
So we can get something a little bit better, but it's still a little, the vocal's a little shaky and it has that little wobble in it. The texture we probably wouldn't use in this scenario. Repitch I'm going to cover in a second, but you can see now if I set this to complex,
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
how much nicer that sounds compared to the other two. Considering I'm nearly doubling the size of this audio and stretching it, Ableton's done a pretty good job of maintaining the quality of the audio.
Ripping my heart was so easy.
And I can change this to Complex Pro as well. Now the formants and the envelope aren't actually going to change it too much unless we start transposing. So if I transpose this down, let's say I want an octave down.
Ripping my heart was so.
Let me change this back to complex.
Ripping my heart was so easy.
You'll notice when I put it an octave down here in complex,
Ripping my heart was,
the voice has gotten much deeper,
ripping my heart was so easy.
on top of obviously being slowed down. If I change this to Complex Pro and leave the formants up, what this is going to do is it's going to try and maintain the original formants of the audio file, so the original voice size, but still have it pitched down 12 semitones.
Ripping my heart was so easy, so easy.
So it gives you quite a creepy vibe. If I change this down now,
Ripping my
My heart was so easy. So easy.
see now it's not trying to maintain the original formants, so it's just pitching the whole voice down, and basically the voice is getting bigger.
Ripping my heart was so easy. So
easy.
You can change this envelope here
Ripping my heart
as well.
was so easy.
So play around with that, bring some different audio files in, especially vocals for this kind of thing, that way you can hear it a lot better, or even entire tracks with drums and music and everything in it. Okay, I've just dragged this track in. We've seen this before from the arrangement week, where I was showing you about track structure. So I'm going to show you how repitch works, just on a full track with vocals, drums, everything, FX, everything's going on here. So this is the original BPM of the track in both my project and the audio file. It's actually 113, so I'll just quickly... Ableton automatically tried to figure it out and it got pretty close, so it's basically there. Sorry, I'll play it how it was. So that's completely unwarped, exactly how the original song sounds. Now I'm going to warp it, and I'm going to set it to repitch. Now you can hear that nothing's actually changed yet. If I come up to our track tempo here, and I start messing with this,
I just wanna dive in the water with
can see how I've completely slowed down the track, but I've also pitched it down at the same time. So repitch, like I was saying before, it works much like vinyl. If you slow down vinyl, it's going to get slower, and the pitch and everything's going to come down with it.
Promises.
So the key's going to change and the speed's going to change. So same if I go the other way here. So we remember 113 was our original.
I just wanna dive in the water with you, baby. We can't see the bottom. It's so easy to fall for each other. I'm just hoping we catch one another.
You can see the track's playing at 150 BPM now, so the pitch is higher, it's faster, and everything's just been brought up. And it's staying in time with our tempo. And you can push this as much as you want, really. Obviously it starts to sound pretty bad if you go too far. But yeah, that's a handy little thing to know, is that you can use repitch to completely slow down music or your audio files, whatever it may be. You just have to make sure that your original BPM is set correctly in here, and then you can change your tempo. That way it'll stay in time with your track. So those are the main parts covered of audio tracks and what all this actually means. Now we're going to take a look at actually sampling audio files and how we can do that and using Simpler.